Hey, today I'm joined with Dallas Carter, and we're going to talk about combat sports, primarily Jiu Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. We both are practitioners in Jiu Jitsu, and talk about, why is it that there are combat sports, and what is it about martial arts? Is there anything beneficial in a philosophical way, in a physical way? So, Dallas, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be on here. We've been going back and forth for a long time on via messaging about combat sports and about jujitsu, and
Yep.
it's been great to connect like that, and it's awesome to finally be together on a
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we have in common that we're both Catholics. We both have large families. How many kids do you have?
I have five with one on the way in November.
Great. So that's awesome. Six. I got eight. And maybe that's why we do jujitsu is to burn off some of this stress,
That's a good point, man. I
some of
think that's
this
probably my
energy.
answer of why I do it.
My jujitsu professor is always trying to get my kids to do it, and I'm always like, well, it's kind of my home away from home where I blow off steam. So
Yeah, no, for sure.
so you're a purple belt,
I am.
and you've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for how long?
Probably just about 5 years. I tried to calculate that this morning, and just about 5 years
Hmm.
I've been doing it, and I do it quite a bit. The dojo I go to is only about 2 minutes away from my house, so I think on average I probably go 5 times a week. I'd say the average is four times
Hmm.
a week, though, and it's right down the road. So
Sweet. So, how did you get into it? I mean, why fight? People see this and they see it as fighting. I remember my parents came to my first jiu-jitsu tournament. It was an IBJJF, and I could just see the look on their faces. They watched all these fights
yeah.
like, what is going on? Why are you doing this? This is crazy. Why did you want to fight?
I think that question has a lot of answers to it, but the very first reason, I'm not sure how many of the listeners here saw my article in the Maccabee Society about my weight loss journey last year, but at one point I weighed close to 400 pounds,
It's amazing.
and over a period of about 3 years, I lost just about 200 pounds, a little over that, and and no surgery or anything, just exercise and good nutrition. And
Let me just
when
interrupt
I
there. For
found,
those that want to read the article is incredible, and the before and after photos will blow your mind. Go to MaccabeeSociety.com and see his. Just search Dallas Carter, and you can read that article and see the photos because it is inspiring. It's incredible.
well, hey, thank you. And a lot of my entrance or my fascination or my desire to fight, to be part of jujitsu, is because there came a point really where I felt like I was done exercising in my garage. I was done watching a video and just doing push-ups, even though that changed my life. I needed something that was gonna challenge me, something that always kept me wanting more, something that I looked forward to, the competition, the camaraderie. And the moment I went on the jujitsu mat and got my butt kicked, really, I'm like, this is it, man. This is where I need to be. So my primary reason for me was to stay physical, to stay in shape, and then of course a whole bunch of other benefits, like confidence, and toughness, and all these other things that are really essential and good about combat sports from my perspective anyway. They all opened up to me, and now honestly, besides lifting weights, jujitsu is what I do. I lift weights, I do jujitsu, and I try to eat well, and that's basically how I stay in shape. And that's probably the main reason why I got involved with it. And then of course, there's discipline and there's the skill involved in technique. I love playing chess. I was a chess player growing up, and so the strategy part of combat sports too really intrigues me.
Yeah.
And so it's just a perfect fit for my lifestyle and for what I love doing. And jujitsu especially, and I know we're going to get into it because jujitsu really stayed away from a lot of that, some of that strange. I did some other martial arts in the past, and there was this strange kind of Eastern esoteric type of thing that I
Right.
really wasn't into. And jujitsu pretty much is void of that,
Yeah,
and so
I've
because of that,
always, as a young man, I was in Boy Scouts as an Eagle Scout, but I was never attracted to the martial arts realm because it had this weird Eastern
right,
mysticism and all that. And so when I discovered jiu-jitsu, it was devoid of all of that. It was really just a sport, And of course, we have respects. We bow when we go on the mat. We bow when we go off the
sure,
mat. We give a bow of courtesy before we We fight afterwards, even in the practices. So I think that's great because this is not savage fighting. There's a great
No.
and profound respect for one another, and I don't want to hurt my friends at the gym because then I can't roll with
Right.
them anymore. And I want to see them
If
excel.
you
And they're friends now.
yeah, you don't want to break your training partners, and
Right.
and that's another thing that I found too is combat sports in general, jiu-jitsu especially. I mean, the goal is not to hurt one another. The goal is to better oneself. There's a huge respect there. They end up being some of your closest friends, and I also, as another side benefit I've seen, my boys do jiu-jitsu, my younger boys, and it's interesting that I've seen them develop a really good ability for dealing with conflict well. Just in life, they're tough. They don't buckle under pressure. When someone wants to get into an argument with them, they're very calm. They know how to, they're not afraid of confrontation in a very healthy way.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that they've gotten much better at that because of jujitsu, because they deal with conflict all the time, and they've
Yeah,
learned that
I was
skill.
talking to a purple belt at our gym, and he was saying, if you do jiu-jitsu, come in here 4 times a week, and there's a guy trying to choke you out with his arm and his bicep against your jugulars, making you pass out until you tap out, or arm bars, and that happens to you all week, your boss yelling at you, or someone flipping you off on the highway, it doesn't even register. It doesn't even matter because you experience it so much worse. The panic
Right.
earlier in that week. So how did you
Yep.
get into, you lost the weight. How did you get into jiu-jitsu? For me, I was listening to, someone told me to listen to the Tim Ferriss interview with Jocko Willink. This would have been
Yep.
over 2 years ago. And I was blown, this is the first time I'd ever heard of Jocko Willink, and I was blown away by the things he was saying and his background. And at one point, Tim Ferriss said, what does it mean for you to be a man? And he just said, well, it's a historical thing. Be married and have a child, like pass on your genetics. That doesn't mean just get a girl pregnant. That means raise a human,
Right.
who's virtuous and moral. Um, be able to fight another man hand to hand. Like if it ever came to that, you wouldn't just run away or cower, but you would actually have confidence to handle it. And then the third was fight in a war where people are actually trying to kill you. And I was like, wow,
Oh.
I've only ever done one of those, you know?
Right. Right.
And I was like, it would be interesting. And I'm never probably going to be in a war. I'm too old for that now. Uh, so I thought, well, I should get into some kind of maybe boxing or whatever. And he had mentioned jiu-jitsu. And my brother-in-law was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And so I asked him about it and started looking at gyms. And the first month or two, I was like, this is crazy. I hate this. People are choking me. I'm worn out. I was, the first few times I felt like I was going to throw up on the mats. I was so physically worn out. And I was lifting weights and running, but there's a different kind of physicality in
Yep.
this, of just
Sure.
explosiveness
Yeah.
and tension. But over time, I just grew to love it. I just love it. So
Mm.
that's my story. That's how I got into it. It was
Yeah.
really through a podcast.
That's great. That's great. I listened to Tim Ferriss. I remember that podcast
Yeah.
actually. For me, what it was, the culture I grew up in. I'm Native Hawaiian. Growing up, I was always taught the necessity of being tough, which I think our civilization lacks, especially men in general. Like toughness is something that's kind of just going downhill. And I've always looked for things that were challenging. I always liked physical labor. I like doing hard things, lifting heavy things, things that challenged me. And when it came to jujitsu, really interestingly enough, the way I got into it, my wife wanted my oldest son to learn some form of self-defense. So we looked around. There was a place up the road. I'm like, just sign him up there. There's a free month. Just go and try it. So they went and signed up, and I knew it was jujitsu, and I kind of knew what it was. I had watched Horace Gracie in the early UFCs. And so I knew what it was. I thought it was cool, but never really kind of thought more than that. Then one night, I think it's 6 years ago now, I was, of all places, at a Chesterton Society meeting. And I was at a group of men, and we were discussing some of GK's poetry. I don't remember exactly what we were reading. And somebody came late, and they were just dripping sweat. And they're like, oh, sorry, I just came from the gym. I'm going to go, change. And Then he went out and said that he had done his first jiu-jitsu class, and we got into a conversation about that. And then he demonstrated something, and that moment I'm like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
I went the next day.
What did he
And I
do?
signed
What
up.
did he demonstrate?
He demonstrated a key lock, an Americana, and in
Okay.
my mind, I'm like, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Which
Yeah.
it's a basic move, but I
No, I
thought it
know,
was the
but I mean, the
greatest thing I've
first
ever
time I ever
seen.
saw the Americana, I was blown away. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I got involved, and I signed up. The instructor, the head instructor there, thought I was crazy. Usually people like to try it for a day or two. I'm like, nope, buy me 3 gis, let's do this, and I never looked back.
Really?
You know?
Wow. You
Yeah,
just bought the gi and did it.
just did it. I mean, that's the thing with me is if I commit to something, I just do it. And I mean, it doesn't mean I'll do it forever, but I'm gonna go all in as if like not we'll think about it, and I
Yeah.
just went all in, and I got hooked, and then that's it. That's the story of how I got involved in jiu-jitsu, and now it's a big part of my life.
Yeah. So we're both Catholic and we're serious about being Catholic. And there is you know, a lot of people who say martial arts are sinful, they're bad, they promote fighting, hatred, anger. Some even go as far as to say that watching any kind of combat sport is sinful. It's like pornography for anger or for fighting, watching two men go after it. So they would even say boxing is bad. Certainly they would say UFC, mixed martial arts is bad. You and I have a different perspective on that. For Catholics, there is no official teaching, so it's sort of an adiaphora. We can use our own prudence and our own understanding to figure that out. But I think it's something that we should spend some time on today. Before we do, though, I want to there's a lot of people who are watching this, and maybe they know you, maybe they know me, and they're like, jiu-jitsu, what are these guys talking about? Let's talk about briefly, just in like a 2-minute summary, what is Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Well, yeah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in short is a martial art or a combat, sport system that focuses primarily on grappling and ground fighting. It has its roots in, Japanese judo, and has developed over time. The form that both you and I do is BJJ, which is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is something that was brought to Brazil, by Maeda back in I can't remember exactly when.
I think it was
in the early
19. I
20th
think it was
century.
1914 or somewhere around there.
Around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happened was all of the basic skills and techniques of jiu-jitsu, the Brazilians that learned it, and of course the famed Gracie family and others that were first introduced to it, modified it to fit smaller bodies, and they basically took an amazing system and brought it to another level. But in short, it's a non. There are strikes in jiu-jitsu if you take it to the like the MMA world and whatnot. But in general, there isn't any strikes and kicks that are part of the main
In
aspects
sports
of
jiu-jitsu, there are no punches or kicks.
No, exactly. And so it's primarily focused on being able to subdue your opponent without injuring them. That's the goal of jiu-jitsu. And it is a grappling system. So if you ever hear someone call themselves a ground fighter or a grappler, they might be doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And you win by a submission. So you put them in a position where they could either die or break or substantially lose a limb. So this would be like an arm bar, which would pull the arm either out of socket in the elbow or in the shoulder, a choke, which would render them unconscious to pass out. And if you didn't let go of it, it would, of course, kill them. Foot locks that would break a foot. Knee locks that would break a knee. What am I missing?
Wrist locks, maybe.
Wrist
I mean,
locks,
but in
yeah.
essence, it's all joint stuff.
Yeah, so you get your opponent into a position where if he doesn't tap or submit, he's going to experience substantial damage to his body or death. So it's not like you get punched in the face, right, or knocked down on the floor where you could potentially stand up 10 seconds later. This is you're going to the ER. If you do not submit, you're going to the ER, right?
Right. Yeah. It's basically, and you described human checkmate. That's what it is, right?
Right.
Like Yeah, that's what it is.
There's
Yeah.
you've got them in checkmate where they themselves perceive there is nothing that I could do at this point to get out of this horrible situation. Like
Right.
you've
And
isolated their arm away from their body and put
there's nothing they
your
can do.
pelvis under their shoulder. They can't ever get it out, and if you bend back, it's going to pop out, and it's going to
No,
be yeah,
absolutely. And I like that you framed it that way because that is the goal. Just like in chess, the game ends once you're in checkmate. You don't go to that move of eating the king. Like the game's
yeah,
over
yeah,
at checkmate. The same thing with jiu-jitsu is we're getting them into checkmate, then the game is done.
yeah.
And so interestingly enough, and maybe we could talk about this more too, I actually think that jiu-jitsu for me is one of the safest sports I've ever participated in because it's done once I feel any kind of pain. Sometimes people can tap if they're just tired, which a lot of the brand new people do. They just can't
Yeah,
breathe or
yeah.
hyperventilating. Fine, game over. And so it's a very safe sport as long as you don't bring that ego on the mat. Like I'm not gonna tap or whatever. Well, then you might get hurt because the guy's trying to get you into checkmate, and if you're not tapping with your arm extended, he might think that he doesn't have it done properly, and
And
he
he
might
might
go
go
harder.
more. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So you got to
So
tap.
yeah, you always tap. Yeah, always tap early. So that is jiu-jitsu.
That's it.
That's it. And like you said, it comes from judo. So officially, you start standing. So there are takedowns, there are throws. The first goal is to get your opponent onto the ground, and then the fighting always goes to the ground and ends up in some kind of a submission. One guy wins,
Right.
one guy
Right.
loses.
And what's unique about jiu-jitsu, though, and as you can probably elaborate on, is the great thing about jiu-jitsu is even if from the start you're the one that gets taken to the ground, that's okay because
That's right.
jiu-jitsu teaches you how to fight off of your back as well.
That's right.
Some people prefer it. So some people, when they're standing up, well, literally it's called pulling guard, where they'll literally pull the opponent on top of them so that they're on their back, the opponent's on top of them, because their technique and the way they play jiu-jitsu, they're better from their back.
Yeah.
So you fight
Which
from
is
top to
different
bottom.
from American collegiate wrestling where you don't ever
Right,
want to be on your back because that's how you get submitted, right?
right,
In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they actually use that as an advantageous position, and it's pretty cool.
right,
Yeah,
right. And I think that gets confusing sometimes when people watch combat sports because they'll see somebody go in their back like, oh, he's losing. Not necessarily. If the guy knows what he's doing, on the ground, being on his back isn't always. It can be, but it's not always. A disadvantage for someone to be on their back. I'm thinking of people like in the professional world, like Damian Maya.
yeah.
You don't
Damian
want to
Maya.
be on. You don't want to be on the top of that guy. It's probably,
Yeah, if
you
he,
know what, just stand up and run away from that guy.
yeah, yeah.
So
Which we've seen in his fights. People
that's
know
true.
they do not want Damian Maya to pull them to the mat because if he
That's right.
pulls you in guard, you're going to be out. He's got too many tricks. So yeah, I
Right.
remember starting in jiu-jitsu and being in someone's guard is like in the first couple of weeks. Um, and the guy actually saying, in this position, you're losing. And I remember thinking, well, I'm on top of you,
Yeah.
but when you're inside their guard, and inside guard is you're on top of them, usually their legs are around you, their arms are probably holding you around close to the neck or on the sleeves or on the arms. You're kind of in a net, you're wrapped up. And if a guy knows what he's doing, you're going to be in big trouble.
No,
You're in disadvantage, even though it doesn't look like it from like maybe a spectator who doesn't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but
right.
you're in trouble.
No, absolutely. I remember the first time I did jujitsu and somebody pulled me into their guard and then tapped me. I think they got a cross collar choke, and then we did it one again, and they got an arm bar. And it felt like I always tell people that if you don't know jujitsu and then you spar with a jujitsu person, it's like wrestling an alien. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you don't know what's going on. It's just a different world. You know.
Yeah. I
So
remember,
yeah.
I remember rolling with a purple belt, and he would just put me into a submission, and then I would tap, and then we wouldn't reset. We would just keep going like a flow roll. And I remember
Right.
doing that for 5 minutes and being, like you said, wrestling an alien. I remember just being so foreign, and I remember being so tired and so confused, so frustrated because I was, 30 pounds bigger than this guy and a lot stronger, and he was just dominating me. I was like a little teddy bear, and he was just moving me every which way he wanted to.
Right.
Nothing I
No.
could do.
Yeah. And what a great equalizer too. I mean, that's another benefit of jiu-jitsu is the calming of egos, because when people come in there, my favorite, to be totally honest, my favorite these days, and I do this as a challenge for myself, not to prove dominance over anyone, but I love when big, strong, young guys come into the gym who, don't really have any practice yet, and I love sparring with them simply because I want to see how I can do with a bigger, stronger, younger, opponent. And to see them at the end of I've had twice. I don't know if this is I don't know if this is a compliment or if this is like a jab, but I've had two, Marine types who are really in shape, good guys, but came in and acting like they're gonna dominate, and I got to roll with them, and at the end, I've had two of them come up to me and say, "No offense, but when I walked in here and you offered to spar, I'm like, there's no way this guy's gonna beat me." You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I take it as hey, you know what, the jujitsu works then, because
Right.
you know side by side, I don't see who would choose me over that guy. But that's the thing, right? Is when you know what you're doing, it's a completely different thing. And so I've seen a lot of men come in and be humbled, but then that makes them better. They see there's this drive, after, because they're like, I want to be like the rest of these guys. And then the next time they come in, they're not, mad dogging everyone, acting like they're big and bad. They're humble. They're like, teach me. And I love seeing that because it shows this desire to be a better person, to learn more things, and to just better themselves. And that's kind of a cool thing to see in people.
Yeah, I've noticed around the gym that the really good guys are very humble about their
Sure.
skills. And I think that has to do with being submitted. And it was certainly, devastating to my own ego for the first, actually, I would say 6 to 8 months. There were many times I was going to quit where I just felt frustrated. Like you said, a smaller guy submitting me 5 times in 5 minutes. Like that hurts so bad, your
Right.
ego. It really, for me, it did. I mean, just the idea and the feeling of, like when you lose, there's a physical element to it, like it hurts. They've even shown that like when people watch their favorite NFL teams and that NFL team loses, there's like physical things that happen inside, like even their testosterone lower, and cortisol goes up and all these, it's almost like it happens to you. But in jiu-jitsu, it does happen to you. You just had the experience. That guy could have just made my left arm never work again for the rest of my life.
That's right.
And then 2 minutes later, he was going to choke me out if I didn't toe tap,
Right.
and on and on and on. And that experience, like you have to be okay with that,
Right.
or you're not going to continue
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu. Even if you're a black belt, you're getting tapped out by
Right.
black belts. Maybe
Oh no.
occasionally a
Yeah.
brown catches you, maybe a
Mhm.
purple catches you. Something that happens.
Right.
You have to accept that and then come back the next day. If you can't accept
No.
that, I mean, I don't know if it was you or someone else that told me that like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like a douchebag filter. Like
So it is
if you're the
definitely.
like macho guy who can't take being humbled and losing bad, like in a real way,
Mhm.
then you're not going to keep coming.
Right.
Every guy, I think,
Uh,
believes I've got this sweet haymaker, and if I'm in a bar and someone talks to my girl or spills beer on me, I could just give him this haymaker and I'm going to knock that guy out. I think every guy in college thinks that. But all it
yeah.
would take is to walk up to like even an advanced white belt in jiu-jitsu or a blue
Yeah.
belt or a purple belt. They know how to handle that haymaker. You're going to be on the ground, you're going to be choked out or seriously injured within 20 seconds.
Yeah. I think it was Helio Gracie that said is one of the initial Gracies, or I think it was Helio that said, you never want to get into the idea is you never want to get into a fight that you're going to win. That's not when you fight. You know that you're going to. I'm talking about like at a bar or in
Yeah.
general. And there's a confidence that comes when you have jujitsu. I mean, a blue belt. A 200-pound blue belt in jiu-jitsu is a dangerous human being. You don't want to mess
Yeah,
with them.
a blue belt at 200 pounds, that's basically what I am. I'm, 203 blue belt.
Mhm.
I think that a blue belt that weight could get 99% of guys out there with no martial art training.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is most people. I saw a funny video the other day of guys who think they can fight, and like the statistics are like 90 something percent of people do not know how to fight.
Yeah.
And so
Everybody's just
when
got their haymaker.
that's it. Yeah. That's it. And the thing is when you have that confidence, knowing, being skilled, even like you say, an advanced white belt, that confidence, I find that like every time I see conflicts, my goal is to not fight. I don't want to see fighting. The thing is because I know people can get hurt if they fight, but when you have that confidence in your ability, you're actually less likely to want to fight, get into an unnecessary fight I'm talking about. And that's something I've seen in my children too.
Yeah.
My children doing jujitsu, unlike what I've seen with other kids that do other, I'm not gonna spit on any other martial arts here, but kids that do other martial arts, my kids don't want that conflict. They're not looking to get into
Yeah.
fights. They're not the aggressor. They don't know how to go and pick on someone and start a fight. But if someone their age were to jump on them, I have 100% certainty that my boys would be able to handle themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something very powerful, and it's really cool. I saw this meme the other day. It's like somebody who starts jujitsu. They wear all this jujitsu gear. They had the tap out shirts, and as they get, and then when you're a purple belt, then all of a sudden it's not about tap out, but you have your sponsors and your favorite gi company and all this stuff. And then black belts, they wear tank tops, shorts, and slippers. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
super confident. They
Yeah.
don't need to show anything because they're awesome, and they don't need to prove it to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's another element too. I was talking to a buddy in jiu-jitsu about this, that if you're I think it's for women too, but primarily if you're a male in your entire life, you've been told fighting is wrong, can't have any fights on the playground, there's been no fighting, and you're 19 years old, you're wondering deep down inside, am I a good fighter? Can I fight that guy? If I got in a fight with that guy who likes my girlfriend, would I win? So there's an insecurity built in with men that they can't determine where they fit in a male pecking order when it comes to like combat. And because of that,
Right.
there's an acting out, fighting over dumb stuff. Just because there's an insecurity and curiosity of where am I, who am I, how could I fight? When you do
Wow.
something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you and I are fighting all week. We know what
That's
it
right.
feels like. I know what it feels like to win. It feels great. I know what it feels like to lose. It feels bad, but I keep doing it over and over and over. So we're sort of habituated. And like, I know in my school, okay, these guys are always going to get me. These guys down here I have a chance with, right? So I know that where I am in a pecking order, and there's the confidence of knowing I could beat these guys. And then there's the humility of saying, I don't have a chance with these guys. And so as a man, I know that I exist in a pecking order, in a hierarchy of fighting, and that gives me confidence and humility. Whereas if you don't do any fighting, I think you just have this insecurity, and you're going to fight over dumb stuff.
No, I agree 100%. And first of all, I never thought of it that way, the idea of having confidence and humility because you're in a pecking order. I love that. I also think that that cosmology that permeates a lot of society now of just never fight,
Mm-hmm.
and never have that. It makes men and it makes women, it makes people in general run away from not only conflict, but just adversity in general. Like they don't want to deal with hard situations. And like you had said earlier, I mean, whenever I'm dealing with, a tough situation or whatever, I can just reflect back to the night before I was being, completely mauled by a 300-pound guy. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'd rather deal with this tough situation than being back, And so we deal with hard adversity, hard situations all the time. And I think that that's another aspect of jujitsu. And like you say, I'm in several dozen fights a week, and I know how to deal with that adversity, that conflict. And again, that pecking order is a real thing. And here's the thing too, is it builds so many other virtues as well. This virtue of fortitude for me to like last night, there's a couple of browns and blacks that were there, and I love being able to roll with them because even though I know my place in the pecking order, of course I want to try. Of course I want to make my way up. That's a natural thing for a man to want to do, is to work their way up, that pecking order. And so I love doing that, even though I realize that there's a very, high chance that it's not going to happen. I love doing that. And then also I love going against those guys who I know, I can normally get. First of all, helps me refine my skill, and it helps me try new things. But then also, I'm very much an advocate of helping people achieve their goals. And so I love being that guy. I love it when I sit on the side and I overhear. It kind of builds the ego too, but I love sitting on the side, drinking water. And then, I hear the blue belts being like, dude, have you rolled with Dallas yet? Like, not yet. Like you should go roll with him, see how you
Yeah.
do with that guy.
Yeah.
You kind of love that
Hmm.
when and then once in a while though, when I have like that 21-year-old just like just jacked guy, and I know he has me on his radar,
Yep. Yep.
but you gotta defend that. I always tell people every time I at the end of the night, maybe you have to help me walk to my car at the end of the night, but I beat you, didn't I?
And see, what's beautiful about that is, that's one way to do it. And like you said, there's a natural drive in men to work up the hierarchy,
Right.
right? Like, whether it's, merit badges or, the corporate world or whatever, there is a natural drive to do that. Jiu-jitsu is a safe way to do that kind of knocks out all the ego. Like, otherwise, what were you going to do to accomplish that? Go get in 3 bar fights every weekend and say, well, yeah, I've beaten these guys. I mean, at a certain point, you're going to get a broken beer bottle in your neck. Like, that's not a really good, way to move forward. And so that brings us to this point of, is it necessary for civilization, advanced civilization, to have sport combat? I think yes. You look at like the Greeks, they had a form of catch wrestling, you know, in the Olympics, men training, it was part of the Greek gymnasium to be a wrestler, to be a grappler. And, most sports are, in a way, fun versions of combat.
Right.
Throwing a javelin. There's a reason you're throwing a javelin. It's not just a stick, it's a javelin, or a lead ball. These are battle moves. And so I think for there to be a civilization, it loops back to what we were just saying, that in order for men to be civilized, you have to gamify combat.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. I really like what you said. You got me thinking about this whole pecking order thing,
Hmm.
because other forms of sports. I'm trying to think of other sports I enjoy or watch. There are pecking orders eventually, but I think in combat sports it's the most clear. Because I think of back when I would do exercises in my garage, which changed my life. There's nothing wrong with exercising. I remember one time I was competing with somebody about who could do the most sit-ups or push-ups or whatever, and he kind of ripped on me after I beat him. He's like, "Well, congratulations, you're the best exerciser." It's interesting that he said that, because
Hmm.
there really wasn't anything that I had achieved. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas in combat sports, I know where I belong. I know that I've demonstrated skill. I'm demonstrated technique.
Hmm.
And I think, like you say, it's the safest way for us to accomplish that. Because I take a look at football, which I've always enjoyed, even though the NFL is riddled with issues right now. I've always enjoyed football. But the thing is I don't think even especially now, I'll never play football, because talk about getting injured, talk about being dangerous.
Yeah.
What I do, even though I'm fighting every day, is way safer than football. And it very safely helps me, achieve that need I have, that civilization needs for dealing with adversity, conflict resolution, toughness, self-esteem. There's so many things that civilization can benefit from, and it's most clearly, not only, but most clearly seen, I believe, in combat sports.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about the Japanese, you think about the Chinese, you think about the Greeks, you think about the Romans, all of these civilizations prized some kind of fighting sport, martial arts. I mean, if you're going to have a martial society where you have a military, you need to have a way to train and to gamify your skills. And obviously, martial arts are that. And we should also talk about some of the kookiness in martial arts. We mentioned it at the very beginning of the podcast. But there's always been a tendency in martial arts to make it into theater or play acting. One of the great things about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is because it's based on the submission, it's harder to make it into acting and into theater. Whereas what was kind of English American catch wrestling, is that the right term for it? Catch wrestling?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. That eventually turned into, over time, the WWE, which is performance. It kind of looks like they're fighting, but it's not. And the reason for that, I found out, is people loved watching it. They would go to circuses and state fairs, and there's always these wrestling matches, and people loved them. And often they would offer prizes for people to come out of the audience, these farm boys, like in Ohio or whatever, as they're traveling, and challenge the guy. And it was extremely entertaining, but because it was a traveling event and entertaining, the organizers realized, well, if the guy wins in 30 seconds, it's not fun. Like, people don't want to show up and pay. So what we need to do is we need to drag it out. Right. So they would tell the guy, hey, drag it out for 8 minutes. You allow yourself to win, lose, whatever. And so it became orchestrated. And then that just turns into the WWE. And so there can be a tendency in martial arts to become a performance art. The great thing that I like about jiu-jitsu is, I guess we could fake it. I mean, you and I could do a fake roll, I guess.
Sure.
Right? But the submission element to it is, instead of just the pin, because you can easily fake a pin, pinning the shoulders down, I think makes jiu-jitsu more resistant to that problem.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And again, not to look down on other martial arts. I respect people that do all kinds of things. I think I've seen some amazing guys that like their main thing's Taekwondo, and they're amazing. I'm not looking down on anything, but I will say that that's what I notice is I'm not just going to a class and punching the air, right? And doing this. I'm not just sitting there and pretend fighting nobody.
Yes.
Actually,
which is a performance.
Right, it is. And at the end of, really, by day one, our head instructor gives you the option to sit out of the sparring on day one if you want to. But on day one, if you want to, you can get in. Yeah. So from day one, I was literally fighting people, literally trying to use what I just learned to fight another dude,
Yeah.
And that is pretty awesome. And maybe I don't know these beautiful katas and whatnot, which I have no problem with. I think they're cool. But jiu-jitsu, like I said earlier, I alluded to it earlier, is something that's practical that I can use. And so I think you're absolutely right. But I also give credit for the performance part of it. That I know that I could probably I know I could never do WWE, not because I'm not a good actor, which I'm not, but also it takes a tremendous amount of athleticism to be able to do those types of performances. And I love jiu-jitsu. I got to be honest, I am not naturally gifted as a grappler. I'm just not. I'm really awkward because I used to weigh close to 400 pounds. My flexibility is still the flexibility of a really fat guy, And so I don't have that natural movement and that natural ability to grapple. But what's great about jiu-jitsu is that doesn't matter. You can make up for that by hard work, persistence. Maybe for you, I haven't rolled with you yet. We'll make that happen one day.
It's gonna happen.
But maybe when you see a move, it takes you 3 or 4 times to practice it and you got it. Well, maybe it takes me 10. But guess what? I'm going to go every day and just continue to do it and do it and do it. And so at the very minimum, you and I are going to be equal when it comes to that technique, because I can make up for it. My lack of talent's made up by the effort and the hard work. And that's why I love jiu-jitsu too. It doesn't matter who you are, what kind of skill. There are people who do jiu-jitsu who literally are missing limbs, and they figure out how to make it work for them. Jiu-jitsu can work for anyone, no matter what skill level you have. And I'm definitely evidence to that, because for goodness sakes, it took me like 6 months to learn how to front roll. I'm really not that talented naturally, but I've made up for it by blood, sweat, and tears, man. And I'm very proud in a healthy sense of the fact that I stuck with it and was I persevered through it so that I could get to where I'm at now with jiu-jitsu.
So what would you say to someone who's listening to this and they're like, I need to work out. I need to get back in shape. And I like this whole idea of combat and like the philosophical element of fortitude and of humility and maybe even, working up that hierarchy, building some confidence. What's the best way to get into that? And then after we do this, I want to talk about UFC and MMA and blood sport, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But what's the best way? I mean, I know the way that I came into it was I tried one gym and it was kind of MMA and there's a lot of young 21-year-olds there and it was a little vicious and I hurt my shoulder a little bit and like, this is too much. And I told my brother-in-law who was a blue belt, and he said, go to a Gracie school and check that out. This black belt here is really good. I went, loved it. Been there for over 2 years now. And it's awesome. I mean,
it's awesome.
is that the answer? Is just go to a school and show up and.
I think that first of all, I mean, I am definitely going to be recommending jiu-jitsu over other martial arts, especially if you want to, engage in combat sport and all the benefits philosophically or physically right away. You want to do jiu-jitsu. And much like what you were saying, I think what's really important is to make sure you're going to a legit jiu-jitsu school. And it shouldn't be that hard. You could do a little research. My instructor trained for many years under Helson and Gracie. Done. I know it's legit jiu-jitsu. You want to make sure you find a legit jiu-jitsu that is properly trained, because unfortunately, because it's so popular, I've run into people. I won't say where I was because I don't want to rip on anyone, but I travel sometimes. When I do travel, I bring a gi and I love to go and train. And I was recommended to a gym from my instructor, and that gym was awesome. It was much like my school. The competition was about the same. But then I went down the road to another school that looked amazing. It was packed full, and I was a zero stripe blue belt, and I bowled my way through the brown belts. And it's because the school. It's not because I'm that good. It's because the school just didn't have real jiu-jitsu. It wasn't jiu-jitsu.
Did they
properly.
have a black belt there? I mean, well,
They did, and I did a little bit of research, and even though he had some training, in that situation, I just realized that maybe he was just promoting people too quickly. It's not that he didn't know jiu-jitsu at all. It's that he was just promoting people very quickly. I mean, it was basically like if you show up so many times, you get your next belt, which that's not always the way it works. But that kind of gave me a sense of, you need to be aware of where you're going to school, what school you're going to. But if you choose the right school, also make sure that I really like those, my dojo. I love the schools that do offer, kids classes and all of that. For one reason, I like that family atmosphere. I like the family run things where I know that it's not just, get in there and just maul each other. It's a good environment. There's good dudes there, and that's the kind of place I want to be at. And if you get all those things together, find the right fit for you. I would say if I did it over, even though I landed in the perfect spot for me, it's not bad in the beginning to try. If there's 3 schools in your area, try them all. See what the best fit is for you, where you're most comfortable. Just with the people and the environment, and that's where you should get started.
Yeah, and I would also add to that because of the popularity of UFC, you'll go to a gym and they'll have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, a bunch of other things. My experience would be to be careful about that for 2 reasons. One, it dilutes the Jiu-Jitsu. So if you want to do Jiu-Jitsu, it's going to be diluted. They might have to actually have several staff members to cover all that. Or they might have a guy who's low, maybe he's not a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but he's really good at Muay Thai and he's teaching both classes. That can be a problem. But the second reason is you're more likely to get injured. Because when you're doing mixed martial arts, you're not just doing jiu-jitsu. I've had guys who have done like taekwondo or karate, and they're new, they're like no stripe white belts, and they'll just instinctively hit me in the face or throw a kick. And they're not trying to be jerks. It's just they've done that martial art for so many years. They're in a stress mode, and they just automatically do what they're, trained to do, which is to throw a strike. And I'm sorry, I didn't even mean to do that. No worries, And I've noticed that. And I think if you're in a mixed martial art arena or a school, a gym like that, you're going to get a little bit more of that. And it also attracts a little bit more of the, well, I'll just put it this way, more guys who have like face tats and less orthodontists and lawyers. Like my
Right.
one thing I like
Right.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gym, as I asked around when I got there, I noticed, hey, there's some guys with gray hair here. There's some guys in their 50s that started asking, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a medical doctor. I'm an orthodontist. Like, I was like, okay, these guys don't have anything to like prove by trying to hurt me. They're just here
Right.
for the sport of it. And I think, maybe if you're watching this and you're 21, you might say, that sounds lame. I don't want to go to a dad school, But I think if you're more advanced in age, like we are, I don't want to go to a killer MMA school. I'm not going to
Right.
go into the pro-ams for MMA. I don't want to go into the UFC. I have no interest in taking an elbow to the face. I don't want that. I want to do jiu-jitsu. That's what I want to do. And so I
Yeah.
really think you should look for a school that is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That's it.
Yeah. I
Focus on
agree.
that.
And I want to say something else too. This kind of alludes back all the way to the beginning when you were mentioning that Tim Ferriss podcast. And even though neither of us will ever be sent to, I mean, I say never, but I don't think we're ever going to be put into literally a war where we're trying to shoot other people or whatnot. I do want to recommend as a challenge uh, uh, to get into competition eventually. When you train enough, you don't have to be in it to be a world champ and everything. But competition is, for me, the adrenaline. That's probably the closest to war I'll ever get.
Yes.
And there's an adrenaline and something so amazing and so virtue building, really. I mean, I remember one time I got to share the story. My son, he was in a tournament, and the tournament he was in, he did gi and no gi, and he went up with a bigger, stronger guy, boy in gi, and my son, who's pretty good, he got mauled. He just got torn up, and I remember at the end of it, he was trying to hold back his tears, but you could see it, and I kind of motivated him through it. And then it was time for Guy, and he saw that his first match was gonna be the same guy,
Uh,
and he came up and he goes, Dad, please don't make me do it. And there's a part of that dad part where I want him to be strong, but this is my boy. I didn't know what to do. I struggled for a second, and I challenged him. I said, you can do this. Let's overcome. Let's get some courage. And I reminded him of Saint George slaying the dragon. And I said, do you want to say a prayer to Saint Michael? So he did. And you know what? You could see this mean face, like he was trying to be strong and courageous. He went out there and dominated. Just destroyed. And I love seeing that. It showed me the virtue that he was building on the spot, but also just the how beneficial combat sports are. Even at that young age, it's possible. You want to be safe, but it's possible. And yeah, I wanted to mention how great. You don't have to be Mr. Combat all the time, or Mr. Competition all the time, but it's something that you have to do once if you get into jiu-jitsu. At least it's
no,
an
I think
experience that you must.
everybody, not just once. I think if you're gonna be serious about jiu-jitsu and do it for years, I've only done it for 2 years, so I'm a new guy. And I've done 3 big tournaments. It's the best, man. I mean, there's a big difference of being on the mat with your friends and rolling with them. And I remember my first tournament competition, we were like 2 minutes into it, and he was, putting his forearm into my face, and I could feel his gi grinding into my face, and it was all over. I had a little bit of a black eye right here. And I was like, oh, that guy wasn't going nice. Like, this was the tournament.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a different jiu-jitsu. This isn't
Right.
sparring with friends. This is for the gold medal, for a win.
Right.
And then that made me, when I went back to my gym, to reassess the way that I trained, right?
Right.
And sometimes
Absolutely.
when I'm learning something, like I'm learning a new move, like let's say, a new way to do a shoulder lock or something, I would actually start saying, okay, on this last one, I want, as we're practicing, you're just rolling. You're not like, you're just working on the skill. I want you to resist me now,
Right.
That way you don't think you have it.
Right.
Like you have to start realizing that there are big, strong guys who aren't going to give it to you, and
Yeah.
they're gonna grind you a little bit, and bounce
Yeah.
on you, and you know, there's
No,
more
for
to
sure.
it. There's more to it. And you only would ever see that if you actually did a tournament.
Right. And I also, and maybe this is a good transition into, some of the UFC stuff, but I think for me, once in a while when I watch the UFC, I see these fighters on the ground and I scratch my head. I'm like, man, their jujitsu is awful. I mean, I'm really thinking that because like I don't see them using any technique on the ground properly or
Hmm.
whatnot. And then I have a recall back to the last tournament I was in or whatever, and I realized the adrenaline that's dumped and just the environment that's so much different. It doesn't mean that these guys don't know jujitsu. It just means that I've never been in that situation with thousands of people watching you and that adrenaline dump because they're probably doing better than I would, in
Yeah,
that situation. It's a
for sure.
whole different world when you're in that situation.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Let's also briefly talk about gi versus no gi because if you're a new guy and you show up at a school, they're going to be like, "Hey, you need this kimono-looking thing.
right.
It's called the gi, Gi." And I was a little bit confused about that too because I had watched UFC and some martial arts, and I had seen guys doing jiu-jitsu. I mean, if you go back to the early UFCs, like one and or two and three, he's actually fighting in a gi. Gracie
Yeah.
is. Who is that? Is that which Gracie?
Hoist.
Or Hoist. That's
Hoist.
Hoist. Yeah, he's actually, and it's a really thin gi. It's not like the gis we use. It's almost like a karate looking gi, and he's
Right.
actually fighting in that. Well, now none of the guys fighting that. So when I went there and they're like, "Oh, what size gi do you want?" I was a little like, "Oh, that's what we wear in this." Okay, I didn't quite realize that that was part of it too. So mention what is a gi, and then we have gi and we have no gi jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so a gi, as you say, is a kimono. It's the uniform, if you will, that you wear when you go and train. It has throwbacks to traditional martial arts, that you see. But there's a lot of benefit to it. I think there's benefits to gi and no gi. I recommend, and I'm not taking it just, of course, any jiu-jitsu guy is free to disagree with me, but Marcelo Garcia, who's a nine-time world champion, he
Boss.
is a nine-time, and I think seven of those is no-gi, and he says that something like 80% of his training is in gi,
Yeah.
and
And
so
just for
they
clarification
really,
for those listening, no gi means you're not wearing the traditional
yes,
kimono. You're wearing like a rash guard and some
board shorts,
shorts
yeah,
or even like yoga pants. Like you're not wearing any
right,
loose clothing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and really what that's supposed to mimic is fighting someone that doesn't have any clothes on.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to be gripping onto clothing,
Yeah.
unlike the gi where you're using their gi, you're choking them with their gi and
Yeah. So in
whatnot.
gi,
And I think,
I would reach and grab your sleeve. I would
right,
grab your
yeah,
collar. I would even choke you with the collar.
right,
All kinds. I would, even maybe pinch around your hip and get some and push your hip into the ground,
right,
holding to the gi. So it's
right.
basically you're wrestling and the guy just has 100 handles hanging off his
Absolutely.
body that you can
Yeah.
use and you
as,
can
as
pivot
opposed
with.
to as opposed to nogi where you're going to be grabbing behind the head,
Right.
grabbing wrists,
Grabbing behind the
grabbing,
arms.
your actual
Yeah.
exactly. And so there's different techniques there, and I think that they have benefits. And this is I always explain the benefits to both. I think that I love both and I do both. And Nogi seemed, first of all, it's lighter, especially during the summer here in Hawaii. That's where I am, by the way, for those that don't know that. It's a lot cooler to be able to roll Nogi because you don't have this kimono on that's making you sweat just standing there. And so I like doing that, and I think that there is something to be said about the fact that for the most part if you were to get into a street altercation, you're most likely not going to be, I guess, unless you're at church and someone wants to attack you and they're wearing a long sleeve shirt, like you're really not going to have all these handles. And there's something to be said about that. But the idea when someone says that, well, this is just more real to life, I don't know if I agree with that because look at the shirt you're wearing right
Yeah.
now. Any shirt you know how to choke me using even this T-shirt. Like
Yeah.
there are ways to do it, and most times people are going to be wearing something if you had to get into an altercation. In addition to that, though, I think that the power of gi is, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, is when you're doing no gi, if you were to do like a far side armbar from side control or whatever. I like when people do it in no gi because I'm able to time it and easily slip out of the armbar.
Hmm.
My body just slips because I'm sweaty and it
Yeah.
slips. And
Yeah.
that's a
There's no
valid
fabric.
escape.
Yeah.
Right. But if you learn how to escape in gi, you're learning a technique of how to escape when someone has full control of
Yeah.
that arm holding on to all of these
Yeah.
grips
It's
and
harder.
handles.
Yeah.
It's harder. And so I think that you need both because learning how to escape technically when you're wearing the gi is just going to make you a better
Yeah.
no gi
It's like
grappler.
I remember taking a swimming first aid course, something like that, and we had to tread water in our swimsuit for like I can't remember how long it was, and then we also had to tread water fully clothed, and I can't remember how long that
Mm,
was. But treading water with clothes on is hard.
yep.
Swimming with clothes on is hard. It's the same kind of thing. It's like you said, like we're just have all these handles on us,
Right.
and you can even untuck the gi and sling it around their neck, trap their arm with it. You can do all kinds of things with the gi. You can even use their
How do you
belt.
know?
Yeah,
That's one of my favorite techniques.
yeah.
I love all that's one of my favorite ways to attack.
Hmm.
So the way I tie my belt, it's a traditional tie, but I don't mind if my belt comes off because I like to use my gis,
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
sparring,
You can use
So
your own gi. You can use their gi
their gi,
to
that's
to
right,
to wrap and do all kinds of things to them. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it adds more pieces to the chessboard when you're
for sure.
and changes it too. Like I find myself when I only do gi maybe once a week. I haven't really done it at all in the last couple of months. And I find myself actually sometimes reaching for gi positions, and I'm like, it's not there. Dang it! I just wasted
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Like
yeah. I know for
even
sure.
having a guy guard and like reaching up across the neck. Oh, there's no collar there. I have to go this way. And it just learning
Yeah,
the different routes, gi no gi, is important.
I think the other aspect of no-gi that I really like too is one of the now this is probably inside baseball talk here, but I really love no-gi when it comes to leg attacks too, because at our school we don't really do besides straight foot locks. We don't really do anything in the gi when it comes to just for safety. We don't
Yeah,
allow certain things in gi, and it's because of the friction of it's easier to it would be easier to injure someone in the gi. But I find that leg locks, even though it's not my specialty or my preferred game, I really enjoy it. And in the no-gi, it becomes a neutralizer because guys who are slightly better than me that I can never catch, I can never submit. When you have the added addition to all these leg locks, I catch them sometimes because it's a whole different world of jiu-jitsu.
yeah.
And so I really like no-gi when it comes to practicing leg locks, which at a certain level, in some tournaments, they do allow those same things in the gi. But at our school anyway, we primarily practice those things in no gi.
Yeah. My professor is a champion several times over no-gi. He does really
Awesome.
well in no-gi. Just won a tournament not long ago. And he's told me, in no uncertain terms, you need to be in the gi. It's he
Right.
really
Oh,
believes that you need at least 2 years in the gi before you even start thinking about gi. And he doesn't. I think at our school you can't come to a no gi class. Yeah, you must have at least two stripe white belt to even show up,
to go to
and you
no
kind
gi.
of need his permission because he
Oh
really
yeah,
thinks that the gi is where you have to learn everything. Like you were saying with Marcelo Garcia, you start there, and so I do some no gi, but not very much. But I think that's just kind of the flavor of our gym and our professor. By the way, you call your coach professor in jiu-jitsu, professor from Brazil, from Portuguese. Um, and so that's, I don't know any better. I just do what he says. I do
no,
some
yeah,
gi, but I realize there's a lot I need to learn in the gi before I get out of the
absolutely.
gi.
And it's interesting that really good jujitsu all around all around the world, most of the professors agree. And it's the same thing with at our school. My professor, world champ, and he's a bit older now, but back in 2007, world champ, and he has his credentials in nogi, even though he's like I train mostly gi,
Hmm.
and there are some transitions that you'll need to learn. There is a bit of different technique, but if you're consistent in gi, after just a month in nogi, you're going to find that it transitions fine, and that everything you've learned in gis really helped you in nogi for sure. I agree with that 100%.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
let's talk about UFC and MMA. All right, we're Christian, we're Catholics, we're gentlemen. We believe in human dignity, right? So, is it okay to participate in MMA? And is it okay to watch UFC? There's a huge debate on this. Last year, Father Mike Schmitz, who's a really well-known priest on YouTube, he came out with a video saying, hey, this is wrong. If you're Catholic, you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be watching UFC. That's bad.
Mm.
And then a lot of
Right.
people answered that, and he made a response video. And so I think, we should talk about that. I
Yeah.
watch UFC. I know you watch UFC, Bellator, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
How do we justify that? These are men hitting each other in the face. Blood is coming out of their mouth. Blood's coming out of their, split eyebrow. They're on top of each other. They're trying to choke each other. Stuff that we experience in jiu-jitsu. And for the record, mixed martial arts is you take everything. You can
Great.
take Muay Thai, which is almost like kickboxing. You take the basis of it all is jiu-jitsu. If you don't have jiu-jitsu, you have no hope in mixed martial arts nowadays. Like
Right.
if you don't have an awesome guard, if you don't know, the locks and the arm bars, you are
Yep.
toast. So now it used to be in UFC that was like there was the jiu-jitsu guy and then there's the Muay Thai guy. Now all these I guess would everyone in the UFC be at least a brown belt,
I
if
would
not black?
say, or I've seen people who are purple belts, but are black belts and like five other things, and also did catch wrestling and sambo, some other
Right.
kind of
Or a
thing.
college
But
wrestler
jiu-jitsu
or
is a
something.
purple
Yeah.
belt. Exactly. Yeah, but for the most part, and all those guys in any other school would probably be a brown belt, but they just haven't been in jiu-jitsu long enough to
Yeah.
be the brown belt yet.
Yeah, I know like Cowboy
So,
Cerrone, who he's not a great grappler, but like he was saying, I just not in the gi enough in my training camps to ever. I think he did get his black belt recently, but he just said I'm just not in the gi enough to actually earn it. But
what's really funny is, and I think he's a brown belt, but even though he had to pull out of that last fight, there was this UFC in like leading up to what was supposed to be the Holloway Ortega fight. There was like this little behind the scenes thing with Holloway, and it showed him rolling in a blue belt. I was like, wait, what? And I'm pretty
really,
sure he's much higher than that. Yeah, it showed him in the video. I think it was just a psych. I think it was kind of just like, like a more like a psychological thing,
hmm
because he definitely is not. I think he's a brown belt. I could be wrong.
yeah,
I have friends that roll with him all the time. I'll have to ask, but
yeah, he's in
it showed him
Hawaii,
in, yeah,
right? Yeah.
it showed him in a blue belt, and I think that it's just because it was a psychological thing, like kind of like the pre-fight, psychological thing, like I'm only a blue belt, but I think that my response, because I remember watching that from Father Mike Schmitz, which I really like that guy. When I do catechetics, I use his videos sometimes. I think he's
Yeah,
very
he's got
engaging.
some good stuff. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
and I think that as well as I use Dr. Taylor Marshall. My students know Dr. Taylor Marshall and some of his videos as well. But I think that when I heard that, I think this might be more of just an apologetic response as opposed to deeply philosophical or everything. But I think that where that fails is I've heard the gladiator argument and whatnot. But you have two willing participants. It's not somebody being forced to
yeah.
fight.
It's not
You
a
have two willing
slave. Yeah,
participants. Right. And you also have a referee that stops it. They're very good at it. It's a
you
controlled
have
thing,
doctors.
very controlled thing. And, you know, also that respect thing is huge. Even when you see people who are building up kind of the WWE aspect of like this pre-fight thing,
Yeah, like Conor
I
McGregor,
even think of
Nate
like,
Diaz, kind of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But you know what? After the fight, there's nothing but respect. And this is even when they're not in the ring together about how well the other guy fought, whatnot. There's a great respect there. And it always just kind of is a throwback to when I'm in the gym or even in a tournament at the end of the fight, even though the guy wasn't being nice, It's just like, "Hey, thank you for a good fight." And then usually, if you wanted to, you can go and hang out with that guy after and laugh. And I
Yeah.
love seeing my son get into these tournaments because it's funny seeing them go at it. And then after they have their arms around each other, they're eating ice cream, and like, it's just, there's a respect there. And I think knowing that about martial arts makes me understand a little bit more about what's really going on, in MMA. And then the other thing too is I played football in high school. And if you're going to, say that something isn't, something that you should watch or something that you shouldn't promote, there's a whole bunch of other sports I think that should be thrown in there before the UFC. Football, hockey, where it's a part of it to punch each other. Like there's so many other things that are unregulated. Now, I am not for going to, I'm not sure where you stand on this. I'm not for going to underground, unregulated fist fight type
Yeah.
of things.
Right.
But when it comes to something that's regulated, that's
Who was that
controlled
guy that had all the YouTube videos? That guy who would go, like, what was his name? Kiko or something like
oh,
that?
Kimbo Slice.
Kimbo, yeah. Kimbo Slice. I'm not down with the Kimbo Slice. It's like fights in people's backyards, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And I think that
Because we're talking about sporting.
Absolutely. And they're all professionals. You're not, like you say, WWE choosing somebody from the stands to come and, fight. These are all trained, highly professional, trained martial artists who know what they're doing, who are willingly signing up for it, who are tested for drugs. It's super regulated.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that a lot of the arguments I've heard against it, unfortunately, and I know this is super unpolitically correct for me to say, but it's because of the society that has been told not to fight and has been, told to stay away from adversity. So watching something where there's adversity makes them uncomfortable. And it's really, for a lot of people, I think it's the wussification of our society.
Yeah.
It really is that we're afraid of.
I was reading to my sons a Robin Hood section, and there's a section in there where there's the friars. I think it's the king is dressed as a friar, and pardon me because I forget some of the details, but there was a prize or some money or something that wanted to be won. And so the way that the friars settled it, these are Catholic friars, and this is fiction, but it shows the era, is they would each take turns punching each other in the face. And then the winner would get it. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I'm reading this story to my kids. It's like, this is like a martial art. And when you really think about it, if you're in the regulated UFC situation, do you know of anyone that's fought in the UFC, I'm just trying to think myself, who has permanent damage, like a Muhammad Ali kind of thing?
Yeah. So
is there anyone?
No, not yet. But that's the thing is, if there ever is down the road something like that happens, that's something to be discussed. But let me point out, from my understanding, that hasn't happened yet. And number two, if we're gonna use that as the fodder to make an argument against combat sports or UFC, then let's first of all deal with the ones that's already happened. Football, hockey. Let's deal with all of those first.
Even in baseball, you have a ball that's coming towards your body within inches, going 70 to 99 miles per hour. Guys are getting hit in the jaw, elbow, face. Here's the thing: sports have danger in them.
They are.
It wouldn't be interesting if it was a pillow fight. Sports, sports include danger.
Yes.
And maybe we just need to accept that they include danger, and the participants accept that.
Right. Absolutely.
That doesn't make it morally wrong or morally evil.
No, it doesn't. And I want to point out something too. A professional fighter is fighting 3 times a year? Yeah. He's not putting himself in because when they spar, for the most part, it might get, a little bit more intense at certain parts, but they're not participating in what you see in UFC every single day at that level.
Yeah, they'd be,
and so you're seeing somebody for a max 20 minutes 3 times a year get into a ring.
I wish it were 3 times a year. It's more like 1 time a year now for these guys.
I know. So especially after they make some money. All my favorite fighters don't want to fight anymore.
Yeah.
But I think those are all really good sports, and I mean, really good points that you make, and I think that I still think that people listen. If you have a parent that doesn't want their kids watching it or whatever, fine. I'm not going to say that you're immoral for not watching it. You know what I mean? Like you can make that decision, but I think that a lot of the moral arguments that have been tried to be used against the watching UFC and whatnot, it just I like to think I'm thoughtful about all of these things, that I reflect on things, and it's just never been compelling. It's never been it's never what's the word I'm looking for? It's never led me to feel like this is something I shouldn't be watching or participating in. And not that I'm the MMA fighter. I don't do stand up, so I would never be in the MMA ring just because I don't feel like I'm. It would be bad for me to be in that ring because
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not a professional fighter. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so, but anyway, yeah.
I think in our Catholic tradition, we have a history of martial combat sports, jousting and hand-to-hand fighting and fencing and all kinds of things that are dangerous, that are related to fighting, but they've always been accepted and incorporated into Catholic cultures. And so I don't see really what the problem is. I think the reason that people don't like it is, you see now photos, memes, videos, and there's blood. I think that the fact that sometimes blood is on the mat or on the face, people get really freaked out. Like, this is really, really, really bad. But like, if you go back to football, I mean, the concussions and the concussive things that happen to the brain, so much worse than getting this split. Most of the time when you see these guys getting a split in the eyebrows, they don't even get stitches. It's not
Right.
super deep. But I mean, if you get cut anywhere in the forehead or up here, it bleeds a lot. I don't know if you've ever been cut up here. It bleeds a ton.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, these guys, if they get, kicked, punched, or whatever on the temples, there's blood on their face. Like, I remember that. What was the match? Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. Was that the first one where Nate Diaz is just like completely red? He's just cut open.
I think both matches he was like
Yeah,
that.
I know, right. I mean, there's just a lot of blood there, and I think people see that and they're just like, "Oh my gosh, this is so violent, so horrible." Again,
Right.
a 2 centimeter split on your eyebrow is
Gonna bleed.
yeah, and it's going to be healed in a couple of weeks. Whereas the neck injuries, the knee injuries, the skull injuries, the ACL injuries in soccer, NFL, and all that, these are like lifetime debilitating injuries.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell you what, I've been punched in the face before. I've been knocked out. I don't know if you have, but I was knocked out on the mat once, with a choke.
Oh, really? Passed
And
out?
yeah,
The closest I've ever got is not tapping and then seeing the Looney Tunes black circle the tunnel,
yeah,
and I was like, tap, and then reality came back in, but
yeah, yeah.
it was
No,
kind
I
of
remember
scary.
I just woke up. I was just like, what happened? And everyone was just laughing because they know I got put out.
Yeah.
I've also had my share of knocking people out as well, but that's just because they refuse to tap. And,
Mm.
and honestly, I would rather choke someone out than go too far with their arm. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
sure.
I would rather, because they're going to recover right away from the choke. And it's not like it happens every day.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, I've had that happen to me, and I will take that any day over my memory in high school of football and being tackled by someone who's had 60 yards to build up their speed and are just like decking me as hard as they can with their entire body. And
Yeah.
also, by the way, I have bled a lot playing basketball. I
Hmm.
fall down on the court, you know what I mean? And I've never bled in jiu-jitsu, but I've bled, in basketball. And I think that you're right, though. I think that there is this. I actually think it's cool to see some of those memes sometimes, because you see these other sports where people like get tripped and they're like pretending like the world's gonna end or whatever. Then
Yeah.
you see these two guys at the end of an MMA fight laughing and they're all bleeding.
Yeah, right. Right.
So anyway, I think you're right. I think that it's a shock value of seeing that, and I think that even though I can't force someone to understand martial arts and the world that's around it, I think that if they were to have the insight of being a part of being a martial artist, which both of you and I are, if we really think about it, we do a martial art and we do it more than just punch the air. We use it.
Yeah.
I think that when you understand the culture behind it, you have a different appreciation for UFC, and you realize that the show before the build up and then the blood, that we look past that because we realize that they're two professional fighters. Most 99% of the time, they both walk out of the ring, and after they clean up, they go to a post press conference.
And
They're
talk.
both fine, and
Yeah.
they talk, and they're complimenting the other fighter, and all that blood's gone, and you just realize it's just like this little thing
Yeah.
that just gushed blood. That's all it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, great. Well, this has been a good talk. We've covered some good ground here. I've enjoyed it, and we got to roll one day. I got to get out to Hawaii. You got to get to
Yeah, man.
Texas, and we got
Yeah, man.
to get to the mats.
I would love to do that. I've just so you know, I read your blog and follow your stuff quite a bit. I've in the diocese, so I teach for the Diocese of Honolulu. I do catechetics and teach theology, and
Which island are you
that's
on?
how I'm on the island of Oahu.
Yeah.
I'm on the island of Oahu, and I'm not sure if when the first time is I heard of you. I graduated from Steubenville from Franciscan, and I came back home and started working in the diocese and whatnot. And I stumbled. I had a question one day, so I looked it up on Google. And your back when your blog was Canterbury Tales,
Yeah.
and I found something you wrote. And then somebody had mentioned. I think I saw somebody else say that you did jiu-jitsu, and that's when I messaged you. I'm like, bro, you do
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu, and then that's kind of how it all.
Yeah, that's
came together,
really
man.
jiu-jitsu is what's kind of brought us together. Is we've been every month or so we send a little message like, "Hey, I just got a stripe on my belt," or
Yeah, man.
So
You were you were like the first person on Facebook that I told that I got my purple belt. I was so stoked about that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's a lot of us out there. If you're watching this video on YouTube or the blog, whatever, leave a comment. We'd love to be in contact with you. I got contacted by a guy who's like super into like Thomas Aquinas. He's a Thomas. He's a brown belt. So
That's right.
I know we're out there. We need to have like a jiu-jitsu Thomistic
That would be
Catholic
awesome.
apologetics conference, and every night has mats or something. That'd be really
Yeah.
fun.
What's really funny is I have a bunch of reformed supralapsarian Calvinists
Yeah.
at my dojo.
Oh,
It's really
really?
funny. And what's funny, I do, and I love. I love smashing them and just being like, "You're letting the Catholic do this to you, bro." I talk to them during the
You should
round.
have just
And
said,
how
"Hey."
does that
You should
feel?
have said,
Catholic
God.
wins again.
No, you should tell them that God just predestined for you to get submitted.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna do that next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Well, hey,
I'm
let's
totally using.
do this again. Let's keep talking about it. I'm sure we'll get some interesting questions in the comments below and all that. So we'll do this again for sure.
Good stuff, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah,
I
Dallas.
really enjoyed this. I've wanted to talk about jiu-jitsu with another Catholic for so long, and so
Yeah.
it's been great having those conversations even on Facebook with you. So thanks, man. Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to doing it again. It'll be great.
All right, man. Os. God bless.
Awesome.
Bye.
All right.